Hello, welcome to probably the last video of 2019. This one is going to be, is Malcolm's latest acquisition. Just to get it out of the bag safely. Here we have his new toy. An Epiphone Les Paul Traditional Pro 3 Plus. So a quick look at that there, headstock for you, and nice, hold it still, O-Vision, handcrafted in China with Grover tuners, and a nice kind of, I don't know what you call this, but low, thin finish over mahogany, so you've got a nice naturalish feel. So it's a satin poly. And we've got a similar, well, same over the back here. And this has battery component compartment because it has a boost circuit in it, and the boost circuit is activated by this pot here. It has allegedly Gibson pickups fitted, standard chrome plated hardware, three-way switch, Pau Ferro neck by the look of it, or by all accounts. Which is kind of nice looking but very light, and it has a plastic nut, which is a bit of a letdown, I think, really, but you know, it's fitted nicely, and actually it came playing sort of okay, except for the B and the G had a little bit of pinging going on, but I mean, not too bad for a plastic nut, but again, it is a bit of a shame. And so just a nice big chunky thing. I think it must have some chambering or weight relief in it because it's lighter than a lot of Les Pauls. It's not a great big, I haven't weighed it, but it's a nice looking thing. So Malcolm's thrilled to have this. It's his Christmas present to himself, and you've got to admit it's a sort of iced tea colour, isn't it? Great looking brand new thing, and it's got 3 push pots, sorry, 4, and we were playing around with it yesterday. You've got coil splits there, you've got the boost, I think it's there, and you've got a phase switch there. So all 4 of these pots doing something interesting. The single coil split, I suppose, I mean, it makes sense to plug this thing in, doesn't it, really? Just to give you a quick tonal thing. It might help if I had a strap. Yeah, so this is probably the last customer guitar before Christmas, and I've got a ton of other stuff to do. In fact, I've got about 4 guitars to finish building, 1 for a customer, 2 for customers, and possibly 3 other than that to go on the shelf peg. So I've got plenty to be doing over the Christmas break, and you can see with the forest of necks behind me, there's plenty going on. One of the things, I don't like that. That's not hanging on very nicely. Hold on to it. Ooh, I don't like this strap. This strap needs to go in the bin. In fact, I'm going to take it right off now, because I dare not use it. In fact, it is going in the bin as we speak. It's one of those things you just cannot afford to end up dropping a customer's guitar for want of a half decent strap. So, and I don't have strap locks or stuff, but this is a better fitting thing. So I give myself at least a starting fighting chance. I mean, it's not a very comfortable strap, but it will hold the guitar in place, won't it? Yes, it will. Okay. Yeah, so last customer guitar for 2019, and Malcolm is wanting this one tweaked before he's got a gig on the 27th. It's just after Christmas, so we're going to get this done sooner rather than later. So on full everything. So this was very high when we got it, and we just, ooh, there's some little marks here where the paint has missed, or is it? No, it's actually, I think it's, no, it's polish. So yeah, we lowered the action yesterday just on here. The angle here was very steep and it was unnecessarily high here, and so now it's kind of closer, and it plays pretty much all right, except I think there's a couple of chokes like that on a very low action. And then a couple of little frizzly notes here. Now what I don't know is what the action is. We just lowered it randomly. I'll check it and tweak it. Strings are still not stretched out fully. Not ringing out clearly there, but anyway, the point I was just going to show you is just in terms of volume, there's this imbalance here between the bridge and the neck at the moment, which could do with a little bit of tweak, but anyway, the point being is we found out that we've got a fantastic boost on this one here. I don't know how well you can see this. So imagine you're playing, I'm going to jump to a lead solo, pow. Massive boost. But you can tune it in the back and give it whatever boost works with what you're doing. So that's a really cool button switch powered by a 9-volt battery. Then we've got coil splits here. Here, coil splits. And it's not bad out here, but in the house, when you put it on the coil split, you can hear the single coil hum. So switching them both to coil split single coils. Not really that big of a noticeable effect, but what we did find out was that it kind of came in quite handy with the phase switch, and then the subtlety of being able to adjust the volumes, as you can hear, using both on, and that's where the volumes really came into their own, because they sort of as soon as you roll off one and one becomes dominant, then the amount of phase cancellation decreases and you get the full body back in. So the out of phase is not necessarily the most usable tone in itself, but it gives you that immediate thin, full, you know, with a tiny touch of the knob. And then of course the full down volume takes the whole thing down like it does when the two volumes are connected. So there you go, those are the 4 switches. Now the one thing we did decide on this was that although Epiphone have done a little quite a cute little thing here, they've put, I haven't seen these before actually, they've put quite sharp little edges on the top of these pots, because you know what these little witches' hat things are like, they're really difficult to pull out. And the thing both Malcolm and I kind of thought was on this one, they've made it, first of all, they've made it easier because they put little lips on the pot, so you can actually pull these knobs up easier than the usual thing you're trying to grab them. Because if you think about it, you're playing with a plectrum, actually you have to use a fingernail to get them up, because you can't play with the plectrum, then stop, move the plectrum out of the way, grab the pot. So it's not really that feasible. But so they've added these little flat tops with the edge, a little lipped edge, to allow you to do it. But again, that presumes you've got fingernails. Without fingernails, you still can't do this. You can't lift it up with the pick. So anyway, what we decided to do was to swap that one out. The others, you're not going to use them very much, but this one you want this one really on the fly, between, you know, prior to the first note of a solo or whatever. You want to bang that thing. So we're going to change that one to a push rather than the pull push. And you know, we could do it the same with all. I'd prefer to do the same with all four if it was mine, but you know, you're kind of quadrupling the price of doing that. So what we thought was, as a good compromise, we'd turn that one into a push while these could remain pulls. I never understood why they use the pull push. I know it's traditional, all of that, but anyway, so we're going to do that. We're going to change that one. We're going to do a setup. I find the edges of these frets are sharp, so I'm going to need to soften those off for Malcolm. And then we're going to put on an adjustable Tusq nut down here. Now, the situation with those at the moment is I possibly have enough material, or I have one ready to go. I was experimenting with different kinds of materials, and I found some stuff called Plast-aid, which makes basically a harder base for the adjustable nuts than the milliput that I was using. But actually the milliput has worked both for Malcolm and me and many other of my customers. It's worked perfectly well in all that time, so it's kind of, I just want to improve it, but it's not kind of broken exactly. But we decided that we would aim for, we've put it on with another of these units. Now I've got a couple of options here. One of them I built using a little piece of copper in here inside of the thing to actually allow it to have a solid footing. So I think I might try that one first. Yeah, I might try that one first and see how it goes. And then there's the sort of standard one, which is here with the plastic. Actually, it's an older plastic base that I made from a different resin. And then if that's not so good, then I've got one here, which is yet another one where I constructed it from, I think this was the Plast-aid one as well, but this has the little holes that I built have been filled in. I filled them in with a tiny little bit of metal putty, because actually what I realised is the holes aren't necessary to keep it in place. They're just, originally I thought I'd mould it with the screws out so it had little locator holes. Actually it makes it too weak on the base, so it doesn't actually need them. So I thought, well, let's redesign this. So I've got a couple of good options here. But what we're going to do is we're going to do the standard thing with this for our good friend Malcolm, and we're going to get this set up the best it can be. I know how he likes it. I know he likes a very low action. So we're going to take the sort of standard measurements from here, or we're going to aim to get it to where we want. So I'm not measuring what it was because we both looked at it yesterday. The important bit is I'm going to dial in what we want it to be. And I know Malcolm, he likes the 1.5 and the 1mm, and I just gauged that by eye yesterday, and guess what? It's bang on the mark, so I don't even have to do anything. Funny, isn't it? You do something 1,000 times over and you don't need to measure anything. And so it's quite funny because a lot of people on videos on YouTube sort of rant on a bit about what's exactly, how do you measure that? Why do you measure a millimetre? Why do you measure it here but not there? And you're doing it all wrong. And I always keep saying, look, it's a means to an end, right? I'm not interested in the numbers. I'm interested in getting to the action I know that a customer wants. Anyway, so the thing is, I could measure the default action here, and I can see that it's about 0.6 on a couple of these, but they're actually different. They're all different, but it doesn't really matter that much because we're going to take it off anyway, and we've agreed. Malcolm has played with his #1 guitar. He's gigged with the adjustable nut for quite some time now, and I know that that works for him and that's how he likes it. So with that in mind, we're just gonna take this nut off. Oh, before I do, let's just check the relief. And we had a look yesterday as well, I think, but it's pretty good. It's about 0.2, 0.25. So again, just perfectly fine. There's nothing more or less or nothing extreme. It's in that range of workable relief. But we'll get rid of this plastic nut. Now the thing about, a good thing in a way about Epiphone nuts is that they're very tall. The slot is quite deep, so we actually don't need to make any adjustments to the truss rod. But what I will do is I'll take this off because we do need to take the nut off. That involves tapping it sideways. Yeah, what was I going to say? I've forgotten already. One thing I have found recently on quite a few Epiphones that I've worked on is the frets have been very, very good. Actually, this isn't quite as good, but you know, we're being quite precise in that we're setting a very low action, the lowest it can be, and the real problems only come on the high E bends. But of course, you know, if you're playing lead guitar in a band, you're going to want to get those bends going. So yeah, so they make these tall, which means a taller bass is actually quite a good thing for this. So whereas normally on a lot of Les Pauls or a lot of guitars, I would have to keep taking this down to make it fit. On this one, it's actually probably going to drop into that gap quite nicely. Now I'm going to knock off the nut, and then again, I often get people saying different things. How easy or hard it is to get the nut off here it has a lot to do with how it was glued in place. And if it was heavily glued in place, you're just going to get some pull away of material. It's kind of as simple as that. You can't really avoid it. You can do your best to sort of move things along, crack off the the bits of glue, and hopefully you can lever this thing outwards without any damage to the paint or the slot like that. But you still will get the glue points lift up the flaky wood. There's just no way around that. Also, when they come up, what you can't do very easily is put that back in. Now, I haven't really got down to this yet, but I would really like to use a leveling compound, and I know that a customer of mine from way back called Mike had some leveling compound for rifle rifle barrel bedding, if you like. See, look, I'm trying to take this off to reuse it, but the reality is I don't think I could fit that little flake in there even if I tried, and to be honest, it's not even the complete flake, so I'm just guessing, and it'll be an irregular mess. So solid plastic, I mean, it's not the worst stuff in the world, but we are now left with a little bit of a trench. Now, I haven't done this on guitars before, but I'm going to do a little fill in this with, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to slack these off. I'm going to use a faster drying resin. Why? Because I need it to be quicker. I don't need it to be taking weeks or days to dry. I could use a slower more liquid resin, of any different kinds. We could use a clear one, which would take, actually this clear one's fairly quick as well. We could fill it with a clear one, which would be a little less kind of visually offensive. Maybe we'll do that. But the difficulty is that you still got, I think the clear one is harder to spot what you're filling and what you're not. So with this one, what I saw was there's a little thin layer of material that's come off that side, but there's more of a little hole on that side. So the point is, if you use the clear stuff, it's harder to see what you're doing. If you use the darker stuff, it's never going to be seen during play. It's going to be purely hidden. But if we use the darker stuff, we can actually see what we're doing. So I think I'd rather do that. And the reason I put this the wrong way around. The reason I'm bothered about it at all is because although a bass like this would now sit on there, probably, actually it's nearly about the right size, it would probably sit on there quite nicely, because it's got more or less a footing. To me, I much prefer that there was a flat, level footing to work with. So to start with, I can choose my weapon, my substance of choice, get myself a little bit of a working table. Now, if I go with the metal putty, or the dark putty, I can see where I am. I could use a white putty that works just as quickly, a milliput base. What does my instinct? My instinct says use this one. And obviously I don't want more than I need. I only want a certain amount in there. So I'm going to need to be careful to level this out before it hardens. So that's the important bit. So just for this I need a very small amount. Now as soon as you start working with this stuff, it's going to muck up your fingers, and pretty much the only solvent that's going to get this off my fingers when the time comes is, I'll hoover that up later, the only thing that will get it off is cellulose thinners. So I just need to be conscious that I don't go around gripping the guitar with my sticky hands with this stuff on. So I'm just conscious of that. So I'm going to get a little bit, tiny little bit into the place there, and I'm going to flatten it down, and I'm going to scrape it flat to a point where I'm fairly happy it's level. Now even if it's a tiny bit sticky up, I have the option to scrape it back or sand it back, but for me it's going to just restore that little bit of unevenness. Like I said, the downside of the glue, when they've used a fair bit of glue, is that you just aren't going to be able to get the nut off and that piece of glue not pull up a chunk of wood with it. It's kind of what's going to happen. So I'm judging the amount, which is actually tiny, but there's only a sort of a minimal amount of stuff we can make up. So I'm getting this tiny little blob of metal putty stuff, and it is quite sticky for starters. So getting it into any space is, to begin with, a bit of a challenge. So we can get it in there, and we can apply it with something like a screwdriver end, and you can see straight away actually that's going onto there quite nicely. Can sort of pull it back a bit, and for all I know that should just about work quite nicely. And then we can probably work it before it goes completely hard. We could probably just tease off a bit more. Now there's a little tiny bit to go on the other side, but this is very small indeed, so I'm just looking to, if I even can, just fill in a tiny amount of trench that was created when we removed the nut. Now this might even be too much on this side, and it might be so thin that it doesn't even want to stick, but I'm giving it a go, see what happens. I mean, the downside is that this could just pull straight off now if I'm not careful. So I'm thinking of something with an edge that I can help to press it down with. I might use something like this metal piece here. Again, keeping it nicely away from everything. I don't want it sticking to anything. I'm just really looking at keeping it flat. That could just about not be far off. Then just taking out the excess bit down a corner. Oh well, that was a bit harder than I thought. It's gone and got stuck to the other bit. But you can see it's kind of keeping it all in manageable kind of amounts. And again, like I say, if it's too much in one place, then we can come back and sand this gently back. But it's just filled the ditch in, you might say. And that's really what I'm after. Don't mind. I probably would be just well enough off to leave that alone. There's a little tiny bit of overspill there, which I'm just going to gently tease back so it's out of the way. And then we'll cut that off, or sand that off. So if I let that harden, then we've got a bit of wastage here, which is fine. That's just a very small amendment. When it's a little bit harder, where's my solvent? When it's a little bit harder, I could even press it down with the base of the adjustable nut And we could technically probably put a little bit of WD-40 on there, which might just, if I can find where WD-40 is gone, which might just give us a bit of loosen it off so it doesn't grip. So that's my fingers cleaned back up with solvent. Let's see if we can find the WD. There it is. So let's take, I suppose we could take this nut, because we're not too, let us quickly sand this nut back, get rid of the wood. Probably could have used a better block than this, but this one, whatever was to hand, well, I need a better block. And the reason why is you need to be perfectly flat. Stay there. Okay, so let's put a little bit of WD-40 on here. Let's just wipe off the excess down the sides. We've got a tiny little bit sort of dangling on there. So theoretically, let's just put that on there and press it down as hard as I can. And then, hopefully, remove it fairly quickly. Yeah, that's okay. Hasn't really done much, it's just pulled up the little hole, which is not quite what we wanted, but let's take that away. Okay, well, I think we're near enough filled in that extra little gap, and I'll just pull up a bit here. And we can just shave that back a bit later on. Anyway, that's just to sort of bolster up the base. I didn't really need to do it, but I like to be finicky. This is Malcolm's gigging guitar. It's going to be his pride and joy, so we might as well pay it as good attention as we possibly can. Right. Put that back on there. Okay, so that's going to set fairly quickly, but we can probably avoid it just for the time being. Now what's going to happen is we're going to start off by trying with this one, and just looking at this, that's a tiny bit too wide for the slot. Let's just line it up and check. And it might just work. You may have to sort of push it down in from the back edge like this. There you go. Now that'll have squeeched up a bit of the glue. Get it out of the way as well. Not glue, putty. So that sort of helped shape it a little bit. Okay. That's close to where I want it to go. Just having a look from this side. Okay, it's probably just bouncing up a little bit on the putty on this far side, so it's probably sitting a little proud. Just try and scrape this back while it's still a little bit wet. Come on, get away with you. Oh, that's dried already, that bit. Ah, I see, it's gone into a little gap in the black stuff. Enamel. No, it's not enamel, it's, what's that stuff called? Paint. Okay, so we will need a little bit of a sand off in a minute. Take that bit of excess out of there as well. using a flat edge to just clean up and remove any unnecessary stuff. I'm just trying to get it flattened down as much as possible so it works the way we want it to. You know, this kind of blade flat edge is pretty good for that. Okay, so we're not far off being able to try this out, and it's just about the right width. It drops in pretty well. I might need, like I say, a little tiny bit more sanding, just digging down to get it in that. Alright, that's close. So that jumped up over the edge of this. I might need to just sand this down a tiny fraction. Yeah, so this has to be, it's a bit proud of the edge, so it's going to need to be flush to the edge to work properly. So I'll give it a little bit more sanding. This stuff, I've got tons of new sandpaper, but I need to replace this. Give us some good bites. Right, so this is sitting a little bit proud, so I need to just work this back to make a flat, perpendicular back wall to this nut base. When we get there, it'll fit nicely in the slot. It's looking pretty good. Yeah. This one was interestingly the last piece I made with a very poor mixture of the compound, the Plast-aid compound. It wasn't great at all, but it nonetheless, even though it had the wrong balance of materials, it actually constructed the nut okay. So the base, I should say. It was surprisingly good how it worked. In fact, if anything, it's probably just a little bit harder because it had less of the liquid component. Okay, I'm just going to just check a bit more of this. So at the moment I'm just working the overall thickness of this nut base down a little bit so that it fits in the slot. I'm not doing anything to the height of it. That should be the right thickness. So I'll just bring this back. All the while this stuff will be setting. Making sure it's all good and flattened. Would still probably be a good move to just sand it a little bit to make sure. Okay, so there's our nut at its correct, should be its correct dimensions, and that would be sitting right on there like that. Now on this one I actually have I've got the left one that I was converting, so I'll just switch it for a good right-handed one if you like. And what I'll do is I'll also dial up the little screws, because the first thing we want to do on fitting one of these adjustable nuts is drop it a few times. Is we want it sitting with oh, there's a miniature one. That's too small. What's going on? Oh, I'm using that's the other one I was using yesterday for the what do you call them? Fender style. Alright, now I'm missing here it is, the key I needed. Yeah, I was making some Telecaster style, Strat style ones yesterday which use a smaller key. Okay, so this would be my unit like this. Drop that in there like that, and then we would be aiming, let's free up these. The aim now would be to just make sure we want to start with our strings pressing on the first fret. If they're higher than the first fret, typically what we'd want to do is just take some more material off the nut and bring it down, and you'll see how much higher it is or isn't in a minute. So we probably have to bring it down some more, even though it's a what's that word I'm looking for? Epiphone nut. Yeah, we'll probably still need to do that. But we keep coming down until the strings are on touching the first fret, and then we're good to go, because the idea about the adjustable nut is we want to work upwards from that point. So this is sitting. It's quite good. It's down in the slot, pretty much where I'd want it to be, but it's still technically a fraction high. But we've got it very loose at the moment. So let's start by tightening up the middle two strings, which if you put on an adjustable nut, start with the middle strings because they hold the nut in place. If you don't, then you run the risk of the nut catapulting off in the distance. If you start by doing one side or the other first. Actually, this isn't far off being pretty much the right height, but it's a little bit taller than I want, because we've got no further down we can go. So we'll need to take it down with a little bit of sanding, but that's kind of end up how it's going to look. But we are probably about a 3/4 mil needing to come off. Actually, we can just do a measurement just to be really finicky. Let's see roughly what we've got under here. Imperials, which I never use. Let's see, right, we've got 50, 70, let's call it 95. Let's check. Nope. Let's do, oh, this is wearing out. The pen, I write the numbers on here and it disappears quite quickly. Okay, so we're probably about 50, 55, something like that. But actually that's 55 too much. We want none, all right, for this start point. There's no point using an adjustable nut if you just end up with it at the optimum setting. The point of having an adjustable is so that we can adjust it at will. So 0.5 of a mil, half a mil off. It's not too difficult to work out what to do. So we'll just pull this whole lot off. Move that off to one side. Whoops. Let's come. Oh, here comes my little platform in there. That's cool. Let's make sure it's back in the right way. We don't quite know. So what we could find is that we could make this a bit lower one of two ways. We could either take material from the bottom here, or we could take material out of there. It's harder to do that evenly, so I'm going to suggest that that's not a bad start configuration on this. Let me just check which way round it really wants to be before we start doing any work on it. Right. Yeah, it looks as good either way, funnily enough. Except I can see it's not 100% perpendicular yet, so a bit fiddly and all of that, but it's worth it in the end. Right, so we've got a bit of material to take down on the front here, and we want half a mil off if we can do it. I'm going to take it off the front edge and tilting it forward, and then aiming to level it perpendicularly. And we want it running in line with the top of the unit. So it's looking okay. Again, I need to really replace this too. So we've taken some material off. Don't quite know how much, there's a bit of a guess. What we're looking for is a straight line. The way that's going to sit right there like that, and we need a bit more off the back here. Sometimes you just let go of it like that, and the hand goes skidding away. Okay, let's have a look. Right, that's looking quite nice. And then, if anything, we just go and flatten it out and smooth it out on the bottom here. Then double check the perpendicularness. The most important thing is that the top of the nut, the back of the top of the nut slopes upwards. And again, this may not be quite enough just yet, but we'll double check it. So push that into place again. You see the adjustable part is free to move at this point in time. It's not actually exactly in the right place here. So we'll just move it off again. I should probably write front or back on it for my own peace of mind. The front and back direction of this is obvious. It's just when you're setting it up like this, it's not as immediately obvious. But once I'm happy with where it is, the base unit's going to get fitted in place anyway, lightly glued in place. So now what I'm just looking to do is, I can really just put two strings in and wind up the G and the D. Okay, we're getting there, not quite there yet. I probably would make sense to actually stop this and fit some decent sandpaper, because this is costing me time and effort getting nowhere. So I'll just do that while I'm here. Oh, we have to move this extra spare neck to hang this up. We've got such a nice collection of necks building up. Let's put this through here safely. There we go. Right. So we've got our thingy here, but we need to fit some new stuff to it. So 80 is a good start grade, but you can see I've bought some industrial lengths of this stuff. But I'm going to, instead of cleaning the whole thing off, I'm just going to put it straight on top, which is the lazy man's way, but it's basically so we don't end up messing around all night on the same thing. And what we want after that is, what do we want? Well, 240, it's a bit fine. Let's go with, what's the other ones we've got here? 180, that'll be a good option. Anyway. Stay. And that. Right, and there's my two working bits. So I'll get some more Gorilla Tape. It's kind of expensive when it comes to the Gorilla Tape part, but a sanding block that's dependable is so important. A bit of kit in the tool department, but really can't imagine not having one to hand. So I don't really mind what it costs. Crikes, that didn't stick very well, did it? Don't really mind what it costs, because you just have to have one. You can see it's sticking around the back. And that's just how it goes to begin with, and then we sort of lock it in place, and then stick it down at the front, keep it still. Forgive me a moment. And then we can, if we want to, just do a line down the middle like this, which kind of gives us still plenty of room to work with. It doesn't always stick for very long, but it sort of keeps it in place. It's not that bad. And then a piece down the side like that, split in two. Tack it there, press it down there, follow it along there, and around the back. A bit over the edge to try and hold it. So kind of enough to get it working for our purposes. Sorry about that little diversion, but when it comes to doing this sort of sanding to precise fit, it's just frustrating as hell to be working with something that's not got any bite anymore. Right, so my little copper footing, yeah, your little unit, where's it going to sit? Is that right, or is it the other way around? I think it's that way around, right. So, we still have to take some off, remember? Yes, I do. Much more bite, thank you very much. Again, just keep going, smooth it out, check it. Right, other than that, keep it in line. Tip it back a bit, I think. That's looking good there, it's looking good there. Right. So much quicker cutting. The previous one was just playing around, really. So let's fit way falling apart again. So these this plastic bit, the base, and the piece of copper inside will be stuck down when I'm happy with the height of the whole thing and so on. And once we've got that right, we'll just gently glue them into place. And so the only bit that will move is the top adjustable part. And I think we're close to the right height. Remember, these are the old strings, so we're just using the sacrificial strings to get things tested. Okay, this is practically on the frets now. I think we can stop there actually, because we get to check its function now. That's sitting on the first fret. That's just a whiff above it. It actually means it's just slightly higher this end, and it could be slightly down to the putty underneath there still being just a little bit higher at this end, which we can sand back. But in essence, that's kind of where we'd want it. And then for playing, we would just move up the action just like that. It's beautifully simple. Move up the action on this end here like that, and then we've got our action. In fact, you know, we could sort of we could run with it like that without even worrying about sanding it back down now. That's perfectly in place. I think I'll just do a tiny adjustment to the width, because I still think it's not quite sitting where I want it. But apart from that, that's how we do it. I have to go and buy some more of these nuts, adjustable parts. Oh. Okay. Right, so what was I thinking? Oh yes, just to check. Let's check. How's this doing? Okay, so we can scrape with the flat blade and remove anything that's sticking up. And we could, if we wanted to, sand across there and remove any more material that's sticking up. We can also scrape into the corner and just take away anything that's getting in the way there. Stay in there. Okay, that's interesting. So I can see the mark that's made on the copper as we've rotated the thingies, which is sort of what we expected it to do, which is fine. I just want to check where this sits. So it's just a tiny, teeny weeny fraction off the mark. I don't know if it's the thickness or whether it's the last little bit of this putty sticking up, but let's just scrape along here a bit more now that it's hardened. I mean, the amount of actual filling we had to do was very, very small. Just to stop it being a dip. We know which side is which. That's like a tiny fraction wide still. So I might just take that out for a second. I'll just check the width of that one more time. Sorry if my stomach's rumbling. It's doing that 7 o'clock thing. Right. Little flaky bits. Okay. Back end is that bit. Front end is this bit. There we are. Yeah, I suppose it's just a hint too wide. Get it right flush with the fit of that. We want it to sit in perfectly. It's a little bit higher at this end, I just noticed, so let's try and take that down a tiny fraction. I think we should be as close to the finished size as we can go. I'm sticking out a little bit on the end just to fit with the actual width of the guitar. Don't want it too far or too little. That's about right. Okay. Let's have a look one more time. So we'll put in the piece. So this really, we don't mind sacrificing the copper, putting a little bit of a dimple in the copper. Just want it not to grind up the plastic. That's the main part of it. Okay, now look, let's have a look under here. That now seats pretty well where I want it to go, and it might just also be, we just get this edge cleaned up just a fraction more so it fits in. Fits in perfectly. The lighting is not good here, ever. And then there's the 90-degree corner that we want down there. So make sure we get that nice and sharp. Okay, so finally, when I get this sitting where I want it to, like that, and I can check the profile, perfect. So now, with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue on either side in order to just tack it into place. And it is only a small bit of glue. I'll just get it to come out. A little dot there and a little dot there. And this is kind of important now to get it in the right spot, in the right go, and there we have it, exactly where I want it. Press down, and that is our thing. Okay, so as a sort of aid to holding it all in place, what I want to do is get the strings back on. Now this will be touching, the strings now will be touching the frets, which is cool. That's where we wanted it to be. Strings everywhere. Middle ones first. Okay, and we've given it a fraction more room on the treble side to play with as well, which I think is how I prefer it. There's a little bit more on the vibrato end of things. Okay, so now we go with our adjustment first of all, and we bring this up. Now it's pressing on the copper, which is fine, and we do the same at this end, and we get to exactly where we want our action to be, and we're good. Then we take our note, lovely. Now we've got the option to raise and lower to whatever we want to do after that. So I'm going to stop, do something now, undo this, select the strings one more time, because we're going to, whoops, I should have done the other way. I'm going to take them off for a minute, going to mark up the frets and put them back on again. And the purpose of this now is just getting the frets marked up for leveling. So there you go. What I could do at this point is just tack this in with a little bit of glue. Just looking at how it's pressed on there, it's wearing it very slightly, but it's not, you know, it's going to take a lot longer to wear that down than it is to do anything to wear out a piece of the plastic. So I'd rather it was doing that than anything else. I'm going to just squeeze in a bit more glue along here. Can't really get it in there very well. and then we'll just press this in and tell it to sit down nicely and behave. In fact, we probably do just as well by pushing this in here for a minute and tell it to go where we want it to go. Again, for one of these things to get it to stick, it's probably just as well to put it under some load. Now what I'll probably just do here is I'll load it on 2 strings, which will give me room to work with the other ones. Okay, so while that's pressing down on the copper, mostly along the whole length of it, I'll get I've got some fresh marker pens, courtesy of the random radiographer, a kind benefactor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark up the frets with these. Now it's a light fingerboard, so I'm using a sharp Sharpie. Is it called Sharpie, this one? It's a pentel, but I'm using a sharp chisel, so I can get along the top here without risk of it going onto the, or I can be fairly confident it's not going to slip and go onto the fretboard, which is nice and light. But if you're not sure about your painting hand, then mask this off first, I always say. So what I'm going to do is put these other 2 strings on and tighten them up, and then we'll take out the middle ones for a minute. So let's move this one out of the way. So I'm just connecting up the marker pen, and then we'll be able to stick all the strings back on and be ready for fret leveling. So this, as I said on the previous video, which I did yesterday for the PRS, mostly that PRS, like this one, mostly plays pretty well, and actually the complaints, if any, that I have about it are very minor insofar as at a medium action everything plays pretty well. At a low action we're choking out on some high E bends, and a couple of the A string notes are a little bit zizzy. Okay, so it's fine tuning, that's all. You know, the frets aren't that bad, but the purpose of this fret leveling is therefore to free up those bends on those high E notes, and because they're essential to a lead guitar player, and to free those up, and also to free up the slightly zizzy notes in between on the lower strings. Look at that, picked an A. So I'm going to put it up to pitch, just mainly for the purpose of having the normal playing tension on. The note isn't critical, but of course the way to know that you're at the right tension is to be tuned to pitch. Okay, so there we have the guitar with its new nut, Tusq slots, so it means they're running smooth. There's no pinging like there was before on that original one. Now we're going to level out the strings, the frets, and the purpose of it is to watch. We're looking at right now, we want to see here the effect that we're having in those notes freeing up. Now, if you remember, we had bends choking out up here on the high E, and we had some zizzing notes, just playing open fretted notes along here. So we're going to start by leveling each track in turn, the A, the E, the B, the G, the D, the A, the E, and each time I do a track I'm going to calibrate the tool to make it as near as possible, copy the curve of the neck. So here we are putting this on here, and it's not curved enough, and but because we know all the notes on the E and the B track, all the fretted notes play cleanly already, we're not expecting to hear anything until we get into the G track, which is where the choking out occurs on the bends on the high E. So the G track is quite critical, but we'll do a little bit of work on all the tracks before that, but we won't test the bends until we get down to there. Now, so I'm just going to start looking, leveling, and just feeling my way with this rod, and mostly gravity. So I'm not pushing too hard. I'm just letting it do some cutting to begin with, and seeing what I see. Now straight away, what I'm seeing is cutting it here, nothing there, cutting at the end there, which suggests to me that the calibration isn't quite right. If it was cutting in 3 different places, a bit here, a bit there, a bit there, I would say I was right. But because it's missing a whole chunk in the middle, I think I might be not bent enough, if you get what I'm saying. I might need to curve this, and it can move after you've adjusted it. So put it on here, and actually, you know what? That's interesting. It's calibrated correctly, and I can see it's got a nice smooth, very, very tiny curve. But it's not getting down into here, which tells me we've got a section of low frets. So this is one of the points that you have to trust experience. If you've not done this before, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, it doesn't look right, it looks like I should perhaps recalibrate. And I've recalibrated, and it's telling me that we're following the right curve, and what we're really seeing is that in play, under tension, this neck has a slight dip in the middle. And now with a bit more leveling, what you're going to start to see is we're now making contact in here. So I can tell that the amount of sinkage in this little patch here isn't so critical that we need to fight the frets anymore. So I'm going to kind of put that back on, and what you'll hear is we'll play all the notes, and they'll play all nicely. Even in that little low spot here. And that's about a 1.1mm action, so it's pretty good. Now, if that's the case, and that spot is a little bit low, I expect to find it again here as I level the B track. Now the reason I didn't recalibrate again is we're using the same calibration as the previous track, because we have to, on one of these 6 tracks, we have to use an outside edge calibration, which means we have to duplicate one. So I'm doing the same sort of thing again. I'm trusting that we've got a little flat section in the middle of the neck, and that we will encounter it. With a little bit of leveling here, we'll get to that point, and that's what we've got to. So I'm feeling that just with that, we'll be into a nice set of playing notes. Tiny, but I mean minuscule little bit of zzz at the end there. And if that's the case, then what I tend to do is I'll get the same rod at the same calibration, and if anything, I will just press the tiniest extra bit of pressure down on this end in the B track. Now you notice I'm going from side to side in the B track, crossing back to the E and then to the G a little bit. That's just so that you have a kind of smooth transition, a graded transition between the two. So now I'm coming to the G track, and this is the tricky track. And just to prove this thing to you again, to see you get to hear how this method works. And look, it's already freeing it up. Okay, so you're hearing this choking out. I'm just checking it's not the pickups, that's the first thing. So you hear that on fret 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Why do we use these numbers? 17th fret. 17th fret, bend, it's choking out. Now this is what, when we choke out, it's basically, it's this fret here and of that position there on the G track, okay? Which is why the G track is critical to this. So we're going to place the little grommets again, or the, what do you call them? Dome nuts. And this time we're going to recalibrate, as I always do, to the outside of the track. And this now is a little flat, so we're going to put a little bit more curve into this rod with a tiny adjustment. And the adjustment only has to be absolutely minuscule, and that is now spot on. This is, that judgment about the curve, by the way, is one of the things that you really will get with a bit of practice. Now I'm going to level into the G track now, and this is the point at which you, as a newcomer, if you're doing this method for the first time, this is where you're going to get to hear how it works. And this is the big, if you can get this experience early on in using this method, you'll be very encouraged because you'll hear it changing how something plays. Okay, so I've kind of done a similar amount of leveling as the previous tracks, okay, and it might feel or look to a newcomer like a lot, but it isn't. So we're going to go to, what did we say, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 something, wasn't it here? See, we freed it up. Still a bit zzz, but we freed it up to that point. So that's the tangible difference, right? We've now rescued, by leveling in the G track, we've rescued a bend that we didn't have before. And the thing to point out is that we've set it at a very, very low playing action. Okay, so to free it up, we're pushing the precision of the neck a long way, and I'm cool with that. You know, it's much better to push the frets and level them for a very low action to begin with, and then, you know, if you want a higher action when it comes to it, just crank up the bridge. But you know that you can go down to this 1.1 millimeter-ish action. And now you will be confident that you can bend a note my fingers are getting dirty, but you're confident now you can bend a note and it will play. So I'm going to move on now to the D track, and actually those are the crisis points, if you like, the critical points in this, because from here we're never going to bend the E over the crest of this hill and down the other side, so the D track is never going to be a showstopper as far as high bends or big bends are concerned. So now we're switching our thinking to the, remember the D had a couple of frets that were just starting to zzz a little, they didn't play cleanly. So we're now thinking about that as we level into that track, and we kind of expect to see a similar pattern, probably a low spot down there still, and then a higher spot. And that low spot may, coupled with these frets here being fractionally high, the two things together will probably making those notes zizz out a little bit, as I call it. But you know, a bit of attention in the D track now, and then the A and the E, and you'll see that those notes will also clean up. Now again, one of the critical things to the newcomer trying this method is to be confident that you haven't taken that much, despite better than it was, still a tiny little bit to do. Again, if we want to keep it at that ultra low level, why not, we'll go back in and we'll just add a little bit more down there. And I know that the area that is making that little sizzing is down there, so I'm just going to basically focus on that with a tiny bit more pressure, but keeping it touching down all the way through. We want to make the most of the, you know, we want to make the tool do its work everywhere within the curve. Now I can see, you know, it's taken material off the frets, but the reason I like this method is that it's actually I think as good as we're going to get. The reason I like this method is because it's the only method that I know of where you only level until the point where you get the notes, or you get the action that you've chosen to play cleanly, and that's why it's good, because you don't go beyond that. You don't go chasing an arbitrary levelness, which, funnily enough, you do when you are when you are using a fret rocker. You are basically going for an absolute levelness, which is it's something that's it's basically costing you more fret metal than you need to spend, because the truth is you never play at a zero action. You're always, and that's what an absolute levelness of frets is geared for, a zero height action. The truth is you're always playing at a millimetre or fractionally more. So everything under the millimetre, every bit of fret material under that millimetre, there's no reason to attack it, because you're never going to be playing under that action. So you can afford to leave that little bit of unevenness hidden by the height of the action you're playing at. So this method allows you to do what I'm doing here. Work the tool a little bit, remove some material, stop, and then test it. So you hear a little bit of grind up there. Now what I'm going to do, sometimes it's good to do this, if you're feeling uncertain, recalibrate, just double check where you had things set, and you might find that, oh heck, seems to have changed shape slightly and I've now got more curve than I need, not less, but this is still on. It never hurts to recalibrate this tool time and time again. You can't recalibrate too many times. Now I know there's a little bit of a kind of squeeze at that end, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just focus a little bit of extra pressure with the tool at this end of the neck. Now you could say, oh, that's faking it, it's not a true curve, you're bending it, flattening it out now. Well, yes you are, but you're using kind of instinct and experience to know why you're doing it and what it's going to achieve for you, right? A little bit of extra pressure at this end, and what you'll hear is, more than likely, you'll hear that when you get up there, cleared up. Now this little bit of, tiny little bit of zing there is because we're in the low spot there, and we could just be on the, prove the point side. We could say, okay, we've got a little tiny bit still in there, so let's just, same track, same calibration, let's just focus a little bit of effort in the middle there. Now technically, of course, you can't reach into there without you working the other parts of it too. I mean, you're going to be taking a little bit of material from everywhere, but it works out. Now the thing about this is, you might think, well, look, this is a brand new guitar, he's taking away fret metal. He's taking away fret metal, Ma. E doesn't sound too bad, so that should be a quick one. Yes, you are, but what you're doing is you're setting it up for its life of playing with you. All right, the amount you take off on this exercise now is not going to be repeated. You aren't going to do it again. Occasionally I do a second one when I'm not quite happy, and it's usually because I didn't take enough material the first time. I wimped out, basically. It's more common than anything, and it's certainly common with newcomers to this method. They do that too, but I often still wimp out, and very occasionally I'll go back and do a second level. But more often than not, you do this once, I'll recrown these frets, polish them out, and then they'll be look and feel as good as new, and then Malcolm will be able to go and play this now for years on end without doing anything to it, and it will just perform the way he wants it to. And that means a low light action that he's used to and suits his playing style. Now, some people kind of make a bit of a whinge at me about actions, and they go, oh, that's way too low, blah, 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 blah. The point is, if it is way too low for you, then it's way too low for you, that's fine. But if you have customers who want it that way, I've got small enough fingers really. I think that's okay. You know, if you've got customers who like it like that, then who are you to second guess them? You know, it's a silly kind of objection. I think it's just much smarter to say, hey, wow, that's too low for me, I can't, or I wouldn't play with that. Well, fine, you know, you wouldn't, and a lot of my customers do. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is the next stage of this. We are done with these. Oops, let's take the middle ones. No, let's take the outside inwards. We'll work outwards, inwards. We're going to take these strings off. They've done their service, thank you very much. And we'll take this bit of the nut off. Now by this time, the copper bit should be happily stuck under there, so we shouldn't have any worries with that. Okay, so, and this may have stuck as well, it may have contacted the copper. I think it's done exactly that. Okay, well, that's fine, it's lifted up a little bit, but that's cool. So there's our little unit. That will sometimes come out, flop around, doesn't matter, you can tell which is the front bit. It's the fatter bit here, and the thinner bit goes at the back. So I'm going to remove these. I won't keep them, I've got too many spare sets of strings at the moment. Like I say, with luck now, the copper won't come out of here, and that's just permanently in place. Of course, you can always return to a plastic or a bone nut or whatever you want to do. Which way are we going? Come on, undo. But I wouldn't go backwards from these adjustable nuts. The tuning stability, it comes from there are two main components to your tuning stability. I've said this a trillion times, sorry if you've heard it before. All you get to enjoy is me saying it a different way. There's two components, and let's call them 50-50, right? 50% comes from your nut slots, and 50% comes from the unreleased slack in your strings. So when you fit a nut, you have to cut the slots correctly and take care of that and make sure there's no friction. And if you do that, then you've taken care of 50% of the places where tuning instability creeps in. So with a well-cut nut, with a good low first fret action, you'll have tuning stability, and you won't have much friction when you play, and that will contribute a lot towards tuning stability. Then the other half is the unreleased slack in the strings, and to take care of that, every time you fit some strings, you absolutely have to stretch out the strings, and once you get those two things done, you'll have tuning stability. What was I going to say about the nut slots? Oh yeah, so coming back to the nut, making up the stability of the nut is, on a Tusq nut, you have two things going in your favour. First of all, the material itself is this permanently lubricated stuff, and actually it does what it says. It's very, very easy on strings, and the strings move through generally without any friction at all. The second little aspect you benefit from the Tusq nut, because you're raising it up and not cutting downwards. Look, I've just gone and blobbed on there. Thankfully I got that off in time. Because you're raising it up on its little adjustable stilts and not cutting down to get to the perfect action, you don't mess up the grooves, so you're working with the factory grooves, and that actually makes quite a bit of difference, because no matter how hard you try, you can't with your files cut a precise, clean set of slots. So as soon as you cut them, you put a little bit of roughness into it, which adds a bit of friction. So far better to be able to use the factory, laser cut or whatever slots. So the only way to do that is to be setting your action by moving upwards as opposed to cutting downwards, which forces you to cut into the material. So that's another reason why the Tusq adjustable nut is worth its weight in gold, because you're always setting it from moving it up to the precise action, and therefore you're never having to cut these slots. Very occasionally one of them's been uneven in relation to the others and I've had to do a little cut, but it's rare. Okay, so we've got medium jumbo frets here, so I'm going to re-crown these. So the purpose of this is just to round off any flat spots on the frets. Sometimes when you do a new guitar like this, you sometimes actually notice when you're leveling that the guitar has actually been leveled before in the factory somewhere. And actually it's not a bad thing. More and more, I've seen more and more factories doing that. And what's good about it is, for the sake of a little bit of fret metal, they're giving customers a straight out of the box option to set lower actions, instead of having it constrained by uneven frets and being limited from the outset to how low it can possibly go. I mean, there's nothing quite so disappointing actually as getting a new guitar and finding you can't lower it from the enormously high action it came with without the notes choking out. So a lot of smarter factories are doing what I think is a radius block level in the factory, and that's a very quick way of leveling, but what it gives is that out of the box adjustability. The downside is when they level, they polish up straight afterwards. They don't do this stage, and very often you'll see that they're leveled, but they leave the flat spots in place, and it's how you can tell they've been leveled. Of all the bad things for a player, that's the minimum. It's the smallest problem really. The shift in the intonation point of a flat-topped fret to a correctly round-topped fret is minuscule really. You'd be hard pushed to notice the difference unless you were an extremely accomplished player, and there's so many other variables in the whole game most people will never notice. But so on a technicality it's not ideal, but actually as a commercial proposition or a commercial undertaking it makes sense to do. So what I'm just doing now is I'm just rounding off these frets that have been levelled. At this end you've got to be very careful that in your moving backwards and forwards with the tool that it stays on the frets, because you're always very close at this point to the finish, and if you're kind of pressing down fairly hard, there's always a risk of kind of falling off and whacking the finish. The other thing too is, if in this situation I'm going to do a little bit of fret end work, because these frets are a little bit sharp, so while we're in this position it makes sense to just protect that off a little bit. And let's just run up and down here and take the just round off, I don't know how well you can see, just round off the little sharp bits that are sticking in me. So it's just a kind of across, and just whips them away. Now what we'll also do, in case it's, I don't think the burrs here, it's more right in the corner. So we'll just go and do this same thing to all of the frets one by one. Again, it helps to have this protected off so that this little file doesn't slip off and gouge the finish. A bit fiddly this job, but even if you can just take a bit of the sharp corner off these frets, and then it doesn't even matter if you miss, because if you miss and hit the fret you're still going to polish it out and sand it out afterwards anyway, so it'll smooth out like that. It's a very small file and it's easy to ride up over the fret doing this. So in terms of making mistakes in handling, there are places where you can afford to make slips like this, and then there are places where you can't. And one of the worst ones is in refretting. When you've refretted a guitar and the time comes to use the block to, what's the word, bevel, cut flat the ends of the frets and bevel them to whatever degree you want, 30 degrees or something. That tool is incredibly easy to damage your freshly laid frets, and it's an absolute heartbreaker. I'm just going to turn my back on you. I have to hold this in an accessible place to do this bit here, and there isn't enough room to keep facing you and do it. But yeah, you can have done a fantastic refret, and then because that block jumps up and it skittles down the top of the frets, and it is so crude a file that it rips the hell out of the tops of your new frets, and that then forces you to do a fret leveling whether you like it or not. And sometimes those marks that it leaves can be so deep that you have to take quite a chunk of the fret life away to get back to where you were, and that is definitely not a place where you can afford to make a mistake. But it tends to lead to it because it takes a lot of physical energy to do it, and you get tired and it gets harder. Whoops, see, I scraped down there but I hit the tape. It gets harder to hold on to this thing as you do it, and you get tireder and it gets harder, and so you end up increasing as you go the risk of this catastrophic skip, which is horrible to do. So another thing you can do if you like when you're at this stage, you can get a very fine gauge like, where's 240? So if you still don't feel, if you feel that it's not smooth enough, you can get something like a 240, and you can get a little bit of paper like this and roll it into a small tube of sorts, get it roundish, something like that, and then if you want you can run it down the end of the frets. Now this will take off any burr that's still sticking up, and again, good to have it covered up there so we don't run over and scuff anything. But the nice thing about this is not only will it take the burr off the edge, you can also then roll it inwards so it helps to round off the little end bit of the fret, and in doing that you're sort of preparing the ends of the frets to be softened off a bit further when you come to sand them all out, as we're going to do in a minute. So having done that side, we can do the same with this side. This really does get rid of those last few burrs. Now this is quite difficult, so you want to get in there and, sorry, making a noise, you can either run it down, keep it a reduced length, or definitely keep it taped anyway, but as you run down you make sure you don't run off onto the finish, and then get a fresh bit and run it down. It's quite flexible, so it's bending and going into the gaps as it goes. And again, being very careful as you come down to where the bodywork is. Okay, so that's done with that. Put that over here for now. So we're kind of in a position now ready to polish, sand out all these frets, and I will continue to soften the edges with the grades of paper as we go down. So the first thing I'll do is we'll get this taped off, but I'll brush off the dust first. We'll tape it off. I'll go off camera to do this because it's just tiresome. Mask it all off, and then we'll cut some thinner tape, mask it all off down there, cover all around here so we don't get any bits on anything. And what I'll do is then sand it all out with some different grades of paper, and then polish it out with micro mesh in the sort of tried and tested routine. Now what I'll also do here is, more and more now, I'm not wrapping the tape round, I'm ending up with a sort of process like this where I just cut along the edge. Less stable, I mean it's more likely to come off while we're doing the polishing, but it's less risky on the any finish on the edges and the underside, I found. Okay, so I'm going to stick the radio on, and I'm going to get this done. The next part of this, once I've done this, in fact I might do, yeah, but once I've taped this off, what I'm going to do is I'll take us into the electrics and I'll have a look at how simple the switch wiring is for the boost circuit. Now it's going to be a straight swap. The switch will be pretty much the same in function. I don't know whether they'll use Epiphone might have a special square seal block, slightly different from the push-push, so I'm going to have a little look and see. I'm just convince myself, or reassure myself, that I know, you know, what the swap out process is going to be. But it should be pretty much exactly the same functionality. It maybe the switch looks a little different, that's all. But we're going to replace one with a push-push, and there shouldn't be any major complications. So probably, in a way, would probably make a bit more sense to do that now. Let's do something. Let's just do. Okay, so to do this changeover, let's do a couple of things first. Let's get off the knob in question, because it's going to have to come off for us to remove or change the pot out. So knob in question, give it a grasp, give it an upwards pull. That's simple enough. Bit of gunge. While we're at it, we should loosen off the what's it? Nut. So we can do it by hand, and then we can turn this over onto its front. And we'll have another bit of cloth over the rest of it. Now this, you could sort of tape this down if you're that kind of person, or you could just hold it in place, keeping stuff away from it as much as possible. I've got that green tape which actually does a pretty good job of holding things down. So anyway, so what we're looking for here is getting a sense of what the wiring arrangement is under here, and therefore what the nature of the swap out is going to be. Oops, now that's interesting. It's sprung out already, which means there's quite a bit of stuff in there. Okay, right. So of course this wasn't going to be easy. What they've got here is a quick lock arrangement, block connector thing, which means the Epiphone thingy is the Epiphone switch is different from the standard one that we'll be using. And it's worth pulling you up to have a look. Have we got any grip on this thing? I don't know how much his battery is on in here. Let's have a look. Charging. Yeah, maybe. Actually, maybe I should just. Are you still running? Sorry about this terrible camera technique. Right. Okay, here we are. So we've got our 4 pots there. They're little circuit board jobbies, and they have the same lugs in them. So technically, we can do exactly the same thing. If we wanted to pull this out, we could replace it with one of the others, but we just have to lose this connector. We'd have to strip it out. I mean, it's non-standard. It changes it a little bit. You could always return it if you wanted to. Say, for example, selling it, you could always return it to its original position. So let's have a look at this. Let's just attach you to there for a minute, hoping you're okay with that. So just oh, I'm pointing at the wrong one. Anyway, it's this one. So let's just take this off, and here we have a little fella. So we have let's just see what the sense. All right, this is a tunable one. Okay, so we don't really we don't have a choice about this. That's a shame. Okay, well that solves that problem. This is the tuning bit is separate. I mean, you know something, you could actually probably hook this, take out this pot and hook another one up if you really wanted to. Let's just have a quick look. These are built with obviously the little lugs on them, but actually I think if you chop the lugs off, these would work. You could probably get the little extra bits would probably fit through. Those would. The question is, would the piece at the bottom? No, that's central, so that wouldn't quite work. Ah, bugger. Right, Malcolm. I think we're going to have to put that one on hold. It's worth a think anyway. Yeah, it's more trouble than it's probably worth. It's doable if you had a real mind for it, and I think I would prefer, rather than rip apart these original pots, I think I would rather find a custom made or an Epiphone made push that was structured the same way from the outset, so we didn't have to break it all apart and rebuild one. And failing that, if we did rebuild one, then I'd want it to definitely want it to have a central lug, so I could make it fit that circuit board if I was actually going to take it apart. Alright, well, that was a quick excursion. Let's just make sure this is nicely back in place. Sorry about that, Malcolm. Worth a try. Okay, let's reconnect the power and put you back here. Sorry, not very good. Okay, well, decision made. I'll do a bit of research and see if there are any alternatives that will do the job, or pots that are suitable for a quicker conversion, because that would be a total dismantle, which I think we could probably do without at this stage. I think the critical thing is, for now, is for Malcolm to have this ready to play on his gig on the 27th, and I don't think any uncertainties introduced would be good or welcome. So that sort of simplifies things a little bit. I mean, it was a sort of fine tuning. It was a nicety. I don't think it's a good move right now. Not until examining whether there are some alternatives units that will do the job better. I mean, it's nothing. There's no rocket science to it. You could pull that pull off and replace it like for like, but you'd have to ideally find a better or a more suitable push, and that one isn't quite the one for the job because of the situation, the positioning of the little ground lug that goes into the board. Anyway, right, I'm going to cut some paper, do this, polish it all out, and I'll come back when we're done. The other thing that Malcolm wanted to do is to change this out for a roller, but again, that's an easy one to do and he can do that. I've ordered it, but it probably won't be in time. So we'll get this set up done with the new nut, and then we'll call it quits. And we'll just give Malcolm the new bridge when it arrives. Okay, I'll see you at the restringing point. Right, haven't done the all of that polishing. I'm just going to run down with some oil over these, and then I'm going to restring, and we're sort of pretty much there. I've given it a clean up to get rid of the dust and everything, so just a bit of an oil, and we're away. So, and that's it for Friday night, and then I will be back after Christmas, although I'll be here doing lots of other stuff in the meantime. But I would like, if you get to see this before Christmas, I'd like to wish you a very happy Christmas and a safe and happy New Year, and wishing you all the best for 2020. Let's get these little bits of plastic off here. Ugly. Yeah, so I've got the sneezes coming up. I'm just going to fit this, and then we'll get the nut in place and restring with these sets of 10s. And then the good thing is that Malcolm can come and get this anytime he wants. We'll take longer to figure out the boost business, or the boost switch. Either make a longer term plan if it's really important to switch it out, which would be a bit of a ripping up the original set and redoing some of the printed circuit board, or we'll leave it as is. Okay, so here we go. Let's just get them all on first, eh? Right. So yeah, wish you have a very happy Christmas, a great New Year, and thank you for those who have supported me in what I've been doing in all this time, which actually kind of hit me this year. It's like 5 years, which is a long time to be doing a single thing. But I have to say, one of the things I started out with back in about 20, what was it, 14, sort of. I was still working at the same time, but back in about 2014, one of the questions I had for myself was did I think that I would get bored doing the same thing? You know, so I don't have a massively high boredom threshold in some ways, and I kind of worried that I might get bored. Anyway, as it happens, I haven't, which is kind of quite pleasing to be able to note. And I think in a way that was a bit surprising, because, you know, so many guitars, but I still enjoy the making, the setting up, and actually I think the only thing I would change, if anything, is I'd like to play more instead of just make and set up. But that's just one of those things, you have to find the right people and stuff, and I chose not to continue doing it with some people that I was playing with, for reasons that I kind of I know were right for me. So as it happens, if I'd stayed around, a particular person in that band might have moved on anyway, but who knows. But still, so that's kind of part of my New Year's. I don't do resolutions, but you know, plan for the New Year is find some fun people to play with. But meanwhile, I shall carry on making and setting up and fixing, because that's what I like. I like fixing things. I always like making things better if I possibly could, and I've never got bored of that aspect of it, you know. And I'm always looking for a way of improving something, because it's fun. It keeps the brain going, and it's a nice challenge to improve something. That's the way I see it. It's kind of like challenging myself to come up with a solution to something. So anyway, yeah. So if I were going to do something different, I think what I would like for 2020 would be to maybe make some inroads into finding a place so I could share a workshop space a couple of days a week. That would be quite nice. Just to be able to be a bit freer to experiment with things. So that's something I'll keep my eyes open for, definitely. But apart from that, just to keep going and keep doing my best to learn and make people's guitars play the way they like them to. You know, and I'm always grateful that, you know, since 2014, not only haven't I got bored, but I've also you know, enjoyed mostly what I've done, and it's paid our way and just kept the wolves from the doors, as they say, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so here we have it, the Epiphone Les Paul Traditional Probe 3 Plus. New nut, precision levelled out, bridge due to change, but we'll leave it for the time being. Now I'm going to spend a bit of time stretching these strings out so this thing is ready to go and stay in tune from the minute Malcolm takes it off to rehearse with in the next wee while. I think he's rehearsing tonight actually, but anyway, for the next time, have it nice and stable, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to switch off now because it's time to knock it on the head on this Friday night. All we've got to do is stretch out the strings, double check the action, and also check the intonation. That's the other little thing to do. Okay, this is settled. The bridge, the nut has changed slightly because I've flattened the bottom of the grub screws just to ease off the damage or the wear on the copper piece. So it'll just require a little bit of adjustment there, which is fine. And then down to there. Okay. That's not on the saddle. Come on. Come on. Cute. Okay, so that's it for 2019. Have a great new year. Have a lovely time at Christmas and see you in the new year.